Hello. Today's demonstration will show you how to use the CBO vaccine invoice and expense report package for retroactive and ongoing payments. Please keep in mind this video only applies to vaccine-related expenditures for vote. You can think of this form as a way for your organization to communicate to VOTE's fiscal team the type of reimbursement you want to request, as well as report any vaccine-related expenses. Retroactive payment. First, we'll begin by discussing the retroactive payment type. Retroactive payment refers to any expenses your organization has while doing vaccine work that is backdated to December 1st of 2020. All the way through when your contract started with VOTE. So again, this type of reimbursement is for any expenses related to vaccine work before you started a VOTE contract. To complete a request for retroactive payment, tab 1 of the funding request form and tab 2, the invoice summary, are required to be filled out first. Then, within 1 month of submitting tabs 1 and 2, you must submit detailed documentation required by VOTE and tabs 3, 4, and 5 completed. To complete retroactive payment requests, start by filling out tab 1, the funding request form, which is the tab we are currently on. We have provided instructions to help guide you while filling out this tab, which you can find by scrolling to the right to see instructions for completing funding request form, which are right here. The first step on this tab is to complete all the blue cells. Please enter your organization's name, contract number, and the start, period, and end dates from the drop-down menu. So you will enter your organization's name, contract number, and then you will select the dates from the drop-down menu. So start date and the end date. Where the form asks, what would you like to do? You're able to choose one of the two options in the drop-down menu. Since you're requesting to be paid retroactively, you'll select, I need to get paid back for a vaccine event, retroactive payment. So here is the question, and here is the drop-down menu. I've already selected it, but there are two options, and you will select for retroactive payment. Next, please fill in the blue cells in the breakdown of vaccine expenditure section to tell us the amount of money that your organization spent on each allowable activity. For example, if your organization spent $20,000 on staff time for your vaccine-related event, you would enter $20,000. So that's what we're going to do. So here is staff time and 20,000. For outreach and engagement, because your organization created social media ads, we will enter 10,000. And your staff drove around getting supplies. So in the mileage, we will say for this demonstration that that number is 2,000. If there is an expense that does not fit into any of these allowable categories listed, please use the other description, which is located down here. And the other description, and you can enter that amount here. To determine if an expense is allowable, please see the list of non-reimbursable expenses on page 2 of the instructions Word document on the VOTES website, or feel free to reach out to your vaccine engagement coordinator. We're going to move to tab 2, the invoice summary. To complete tab 2, start by filling out the blue cells. First, you'll enter your invoice number. The invoice number is a unique number to separate different invoices for your organization. And for this example, I'm going to enter April 2021. Then you will enter OHA's agreement number, the date you are submitting the request, your organization's name, address, primary contact, their telephone number, email address, and your organization's tax ID and EIN number. So your organization's name, your address, the city, state, and zip code. And oops. It will not be entering a tax ID or EIN number because this is just an example. Then you will come down here to the description and enter a description of event. So for example, vaccine event, April 2021. Before submitting this form, please be sure that the total at the bottom of tab 1 of the spreadsheet matches the total at the bottom your organization would like to receive for payment. So this total of 32,000 should match up with this number right here of 32,000. After completing this step, save the spreadsheet and send the entire file to the vote team by emailing it to ohkovid.fema@dHS.oregon.us and your vaccine engagement coordinator. This email address is also located on page 1 of the instruction documents. Next, we are going to go through the ongoing payment walkthrough. Your organization can complete a request for ongoing reimbursement for any allowable expenses following your contract start date. Ongoing payment walkthrough. Your organization can complete a request for ongoing reimbursement for any allowable expenses following your contract start date, going until the last day of your contract. To complete a request for ongoing reimbursement, tabs 1 through 5 and all detailed documentation are required. We like to share this information up front to encourage our partners to keep detailed notes and receipts to make this process easier. To complete the ongoing payment request, start by filling out tab 1, which is the current tab we are on, the funding request form. We have provided instructions to help guide you while filling out this tab, which you can find by scrolling to the right to see instructions for completing funding request form. And here they are. The first step on this tab is to complete all the blue cells. Please enter your organization's name, contract number, and the period start and end dates. Please use the drop-down to enter the period start and end date. So your organization's name, contract number, and then you use the drop-down menu for the start and end date. If you need help finding your contract number, you can find it on your OHA vote, vaccine contract, or reach out to your vaccine engagement coordinator. Where the form asks, what would you like to do? You're able to choose one of the two options in the drop-down menu. You will select, I spent additional money I need paid back, ongoing payment. So what would you like to do? And we are going to select ongoing payment. Next, please fill in the blue cells in the breakdown of vaccine expenditures section to tell us the amount of money that your organization has spent on each allowable activity. You'll find a list of allowable expenses. So, for example, your organization has spent $25,000 towards staff time for vaccine-related events. So here we will enter $25,000. If you held a staff training for your team in mitigating protesters at your events, this costs $6,000. So we will find the training section and we will enter $6,000. The space you're hosting your event at, you are renting, and that rent is $2,000. So we will find space rental and we will enter $2,000. Lastly, for this example, your car on the day of the event had a flat tire, so you had to take a lift to the event, and that ride was $35. So we will find the transportation, and we will enter $35. If there is an expense that does not fit into any of the allowable activities listed, please use the other description in row 35 to enter the description of the activity. So let me show you where that's at. So right here, other description. For our example today, we will use gift cards to volunteers as honorariums, and those totaled up to be $600. Oops. We are going to move to tab 2, Invoice Summary. To complete tab 2, start by filling out the blue cells. You'll enter your invoice number. This is a unique number to separate different invoices from your organization. You will then enter your OHA agreement number, the date you are submitting the request, your organization's name, address, the name of your primary contact, their telephone number, an email address, and your organization's tax ID or EIN number. You should then enter a detailed description of the event or events that your organization held in the description cell. So, for our purposes, we are going to enter vaccine event, May 5th. And here, we are going to move to tab 3A, labor documentation. To complete tab 3A, labor documentation, we have provided instructions to help guide you through the process of completing this tab. And you can see them right here. Start with step 1 by answering, do you have a payroll timekeeping system? There is a drop-down where you should select yes or no. So do you have a timekeeping system? Yes or no. If you select yes in step 1, move on to step 2. If you select no, move on to tab 3B. For step 2, if you have a timekeeping system, enter the name of the payroll output file you are attaching as documentation. If you do not have a timekeeping system, we have created tab 3B for you to report all staff time. So for this example, we are going to select no and move on to 3B. At the top of this tab, we have included a few examples, and if you scroll down, you will see we have also provided instructions for completing expense documentation to help guide you while completing this form. So as you can see, here is an example. And if we scroll down, here is the instructions. Start by entering the name, title, and employee status for each employee. Employee status means whether each employee is full-time, part-time, or a temporary employee. For this example, I'll be entering Brutus as a project coordinator, and they are part-time staff member. So, Brutus is part-time, and he is a project coordinator. Then Lupin is a director, and she is a full-time employee. So Lupin is full-time and the director. There is a cell for each date from the contract start date of December 1st, 2020, up until the new contract end date of December 31st, 2022. Please enter the number of hours each employee worked each day over the course of the time period you are reporting on. So if my invoice is for 3 months, I am going to enter the dates these employees worked on vaccine-related events for 3 months. Additionally, there are cells for you to report both regular staff and overtime. After entering each employee's time, Scroll all the way to the right and enter each employee's hourly rate and benefit rate. So let's do that now. So Brutus, as a part-time employee for our reporting period, we're just going to use some examples and say that he worked 8 hours, 4 hours, and 2 hours of regular time. Lupin, who is a full-time employee, worked consistently 8 hours for these 3 days, and then again these 3 days on vaccine-related expenditures. We're now going to scroll all the way to enter their hourly rate. And Brutus, as a part-time employee, makes, we'll say $30 an hour. And Lupin, as a director, makes $50 an hour. And as you can see, there are formulas in the system that do the math for you. If you need additional assistance in filling this part out, please know that our team is always available and happy to assist you. Please note this tab is only for employee hours and not volunteer hours. We're now going to move on to tab 4, expense documentation. This tab should be used to enter detailed information regarding your expenses. We've included a few examples at the top of the tab, and if you scroll to the right, you will see provided instructions for completing expense documentation, which are right here. To start, use the drop-down menu under Reimbursable Expense. To select the allowable expense activity, your expense is mostly closely associated with. So the drop-down menu is here, and you will select from the following menu. Next, you will need to enter the invoice date, store or company name, invoice number, and a brief description of how the expense is related to vaccine in the cell labeled details and relation to vaccine. So remember, those examples from tab 1 that we used, we're now going to enter here. If you held a staff training for your team in mitigating protesters at your event, which cost $6,000, we would select from our drop-down menu under Recruitment and Training, and we will say we held this on the 5th of or May 12th of 2022. And it was called teacher training directly from the invoice. And the invoice number was 541221. And here, under the details in relating to vaccine, you're going to put training for employees safety. With protesters. And from that invoice, they charged $6,000. Next, there was, from that same training, they held something else, and that was done on May the 20th, 2022, and it was for the speaker. However, we still need to put our store and company name, so teacher training, and this invoice number is 541224-1, and this was the speaker. On safety with protesters. And this was $1,500 to complete this section of training. You will repeat this process for each expense your organization has. The space you are hosting at your event, you are renting, and that rent is going to be $2,000. So we will use the drop-down menu. We will find vaccine site space rental. We will, from the invoice, it says we rented this on May 30th. And the company name was Rad Rentals. And this invoice was JKL002. And we will say that this was the space rental for the vaccine event on May 30th, 2022. And this total was $2,000. Lastly, for this example, your car on the day of the event had a flat tire, so you had to take a lift to the event space, and that ride cost $35. So we will find from our drop-down menu the transportation for patients or workforce on the 30th of May. This doesn't have an invoice number because it's a receipt, and we will say workforce, transportation to event, and that cost was $35. Lastly, our organization gave volunteers gift cards as honorariums. Our gift cards totaled up to be $600. The receipt came from Safeway, and it shows 6 gift cards were purchased at $100 each. So I'm going to enter this information here. So because there isn't a good option, we're going to find the other. And we purchased these in May 12th, 2022. You got them from Safeway. There, again, is no invoice number because it's a receipt. And here we leave a detailed message of gift cards for volunteers. And look, it auto-filled because we have an example up at the top. Gift cards for volunteer appreciation, $100 each. And that total was $600. You will need to complete all of these fields for each of your vaccine-related expenditures. To help speed up the review process and ultimately decrease your wait time for payment processing, we ask that you organize your expenses in the reimbursable expense column by category expense. So just like we did right here with the workforce recruitment and training, we have those together. This is what we would like. As a note, when submitting documentation, please attach PDF copies or pictures of all receipts. Please organize your receipts by allowable expense category and submit one PDF for each separate allowable activity. We're now going to move on to tab 4.5, the mileage tab. If you scroll to the right, you will see we provided instructions to help you complete this form. To complete this tab, please include the employee's name, date of travel, total miles traveled, mileage rate, and a description explaining what the travel was for and how it relates to the vaccine for each line item. So Brutus, from our earlier example, will be entered here. He traveled 55 miles on 4/29/2022. So 4/29/2022 and 45 miles. Because this date is in April, we will come up here to the GSA rate and find that we need to enter this amount. So 0.585. And as you can see, it filled it in. And we will say he drove personal vehicle to pick up supplies. And because this date was prior to our new travel policy, we will enter from the drop-down menu NA. And we can see that the reimbursable amount is automatically input based on the formula created. Then we will say, for this example only, that Brutus traveled and he drove his personal vehicle, so he has the business endorsement. He is an employee, so yes, employee. And he drove on 7/5/2022. And he drove 36 miles. And because he drove After July, we would come to this section, July to December, and we would enter 0.625. 0.625. And drove personal vehicle. To pick up supplies for the event. And we can see that that total is automatically input. So the formulas will calculate the total reimbursement amount per General Services Administration or GSA rate. Vote does not reimburse for gas. So when filling out this form, please make sure that the date you're entering correlates or matches up with the mileage rate in this column. So if your mileage was in the year 2021, you will enter 0.56. If you are entering in mileage from January to June of 2022, you will enter 0.585. And if you are entering mileage between July and December of 2022, you will enter 0.625. We are going to move to tab 5. To complete tab 5, you must include the date the package was completed, the name of the person who prepared the report, and the virtual signature of the authorized agent at your organization. Filling in these cells certifies the information in the package is accurate. If you have any questions while completing the invoice and expense report package, please reach out to your vaccine engagement coordinator or email both your vaccine engagement coordinator and the Vote fiscal team at OHACOVID.FEMA, FEMA at DHSOHA.state, STATE.OR.US. This email address is also located on page 1 of the instructions document. In closing, more information about invoicing and documentation deadlines and other important guidance about your contact or invoicing requirements can be found in your grant agreement, the Vote Funding Handbook, and the Vote FAQ document. Links to the Vote Funding Handbook and the Vote Frequently Asked Questions document, FAQ, can be found on page 1 of the instructions document on Vote's website. Thank you.